Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Southside Beat here on the DK Pittsburgh Sports Podcasting Network and Steelers YouTube channel. My name is Chris Halicke, and joining me on my right-hand side is Greg Macafee. We're past the trivia stage. Greg has been initiated, and now we're actually going to be talking some actual Steelers stuff. Hope everyone's doing good today. Greg, how you doing, buddy?
Doing good. Just another day, getting some stuff ready for MLB draft preview coming up and just kind of bouncing around, doing some research. It's one of those busy days.
Oh yeah. So we got less than 2 weeks until players report to training camp, and the closer we get, I think the more the anticipation builds, and the only thing that's gonna make that really take off is these constant rankings of not just teams overall, but positions within the teams. And now one thing I'm seeing this year is people are like, well, take a position from each team inside one division and like build the best AFC North team, and just using like okay, who's got the best quarterback, who has the best running back, who has the best receivers. And I think I saw something in which it was like somebody built an AFC North team and not one piece of the Steelers was used. Like defensive line, it was like given to the Browns. And, and then when you look at just overall odds, like the Steelers are based off of odds and stuff are projected to finish last in the division. And as we talked about in trivia yesterday, the Steelers haven't finished last place in, since 1988. Like I was born in 87. It's been a long time. And so I wanted to pose the question today, and we'll get to some questions here near the end of the show. But the one just main question I wanted to ask is, are there any reasons to be optimistic about this team in 2024? Because it seems like if you look everywhere else, it doesn't seem like there's a lot of, even though the roster probably looks better on paper, it doesn't seem like the Steelers have much of a chance, and not just in terms of winning the division, but not even making the playoffs. So what is a reason for you to be optimistic about the team this year?
I think it's one of those things where we're entering the season and there's still so many questions to be answered. And I think that's in a good way, because you're coming in with a new offensive coordinator, two new quarterbacks, a talented running back group, a wide receiver that's on the cusp of kind of having another breakout season with a new quarterback, and then you have a strong defense on the other side of the field with one of the best, if not the best, defensive player in the game. So I still think there's a lot of questions to be answered, but I think the unknowns of what Arthur Smith's offense is going to look like with Justin Fields and Russ Wilson and Jalen Warren and Najee Harris, I think that's something to be positive about. I mean, they could come out and they could light the AFC North on fire this year. You just never know. So I think that's one thing to look forward to this year.
Looking at it, I kind of visited this earlier in the offseason, but a lot of stuff has happened since then. For example, the draft has happened since then. And I don't know if this necessarily impacts 2024 as much, but I think the draft class really helps. I think, Troy Fautanu at tackle in the first round, and then Zach Frazier in the second round, addressing center, addressing tackle. Like I said, I don't know how well that impacts 2024 because, very young offensive line. It's going to take some time to gel. It's going to take some time to not just build the chemistry together, but it's going to take time to adjust for at least two of these guys to the NFL level. Understand that Fautanu played, in the Pac-12 and Zach Frazier played in the Big 12. But, number one, I don't think that like the SEC and the Big 10 are better conferences to me, but none of the conferences even compared to playing at the NFL level. And so, but still, like overall draft class, Roman Wilson there, Peyton Wilson there. I think I would probably say the back-to-back draft classes give me some reason to be optimistic. Like I said, I don't know if that necessarily means for 2024, maybe more so for the guys who were drafted last year because they at least have a year under their belt. But the way I like the way this team is trending when it comes to the younger players, and that matters when it comes to how you can support when you have guys such as TJ Watt and Minkah Fitzpatrick and George Pickens, who's kind of, budding into being a top tier player in this league. Those guys need the support of a good young core. And I think the Steelers are in the process of building that with what they've done in the draft the past couple of years.
Yeah, I mean, even before I started this job, I mean, I've been, talking to friends who are Steelers fans and everything like this. Like, I have loved what the Steelers have done this offseason. The addition of Russ Wilson and Justin Fields is an upgrade. The addition of Patrick Queen on the defensive side of the ball, what they've done in the draft and it's been huge for me. And then ever since Ben's last year, I've said, one thing that should be a major one thing major that they should address over the next couple of years is the offensive line. They got to build it back up from the bottom. And I think they've just done just that over the past few drafts. I mean, Broderick Jones is a solid choice. Then you have 2 picks, like you said, here in this year's draft that I think they're going to set the foundation for years to come, which was, what they've had for so long. Like that, Ben had so much time towards the end of his career, other than that last season, because of who he had in front of him.
Yeah, that was as much as we would like to talk about those killer B offenses. For example, it came up yesterday.
Yeah,
yes, those offenses were phenomenal, but a big reason why they were so good was because that offensive line was very good. They had all-pro center and Marquise Pouncey, all-pro guard and David DeCastro. Obviously Ramon Foster, guy here on the network, but not just a guy here on the network, was a very good guard in his own right. Al Villanueva on the left side, and they had a really good offensive line, and definitely good enough to not only create holes in the running game for Le'Veon Bell, and even D'Angelo Williams whenever he was in town. But then also Ben had plenty of time and had enough time to do what he needed to do from the pocket or extend plays or whatever. But it was a complete offense. And I think, everything else becomes easier if the offensive line is good. Everything else, it becomes easier to run the football. It becomes easier for the quarterback to read the play, to go through his reads. When you have, quarterbacks who like to hold on to the ball, it becomes even more important. And that's the one thing the Steelers have in Russell Wilson and Justin Fields. And I think, it's going to come up. So I'm just going to transition to it. The quarterback play thing, I think for some fans that's still up for debate. Not for myself personally. I think the quarterback room is better. I think it definitely has a higher ceiling.
Yeah.
But I think some people, when they look at what the Steelers had, not only there's always going to be that what if Kenny Pickett ever had a different offensive coordinator. And then of course Mason Rudolph, it's like he comes in and all he does, it's not like he came in and he was Patrick Mahomes, but all he did was come in and start playing within the structure of the offense and did it at a very efficient level. And look at what the offense did.
Yeah.
They put up points. They racked up yards. They were able to run the ball. They were able to throw the ball, both, really short, intermediate, and deep. And really the only game they weren't able to really throw it was that monsoon in Baltimore at the end of the season. Yeah. So some people look at that and they're like, maybe Mason Rudolph was the guy. And now it's going to be Russell Wilson who comes. I think he fits in a lot of ways, but I think there's some question marks there with his style versus what Arthur Smith likes to do. Predominantly looking at the usage of the middle of the field.
Yeah.
And then Justin Fields, I think we all can agree that he has a very high ceiling in terms of natural ability. But the question there comes 41 turnovers in 3 seasons. That's a lot of times putting the ball in the other team's hands. And so especially because I'm curious of your perspective on that, because a bit, you're coming into it from not having covered the entire offseason up close. What is your perspective on the additions of Russell Wilson, knowing what's happened in the past couple of years in Denver, knowing that both Seattle and Denver pretty much paid for Russell Wilson to just leave, and then taking into account Justin Fields in 3 seasons becoming a turnover machine, a talented one, but it's still a turnover machine. What are your impressions of the moves at quarterback, and how can that be better from what the Steelers had previously with Kenny and Mason?
Well, first of all, just acquiring them in the first place. It's not like they gave up a ton or signed Russell Wilson to this ginormous contract or anything like that. They got him at a discounted rate for a year. I mean, if he can come in and he can prove himself and get another one of those big contracts, I'm all for it. But it's not like he was some bottom of the league quarterback in Denver. Like he was still pretty solid, and I think he still has he still has to prove himself a little bit when he comes here, I think, but I think he's still got something left in the tank. As far as Justin Fields goes, I've always been a fan of quarterbacks who can run the ball, extend plays, and have great arm talent. And I think he has both of those. I think he gives the offense like a whole different look if he gets in the game. I'm really excited to see what they do with Justin Fields. Obviously, Russ is the starter going into camp and everything like that. We'll see, how the competition goes. I think it will take a lot for Justin Fields to overtake Russ as the starting quarterback. But yeah. I think and correct me if I'm wrong, I think Omar has kind of hinted at creating special packages for Justin Fields throughout the course of the season. I thought I read that somewhere. I could be wrong, but like I'm excited to see how they use him outside of just the traditional like quarterback role. I'm excited to see if they put him in the backfield or spread him out wide or something like that. That's what I want to see.
I would not anticipate that happening. If it does happen, that's going to be something that is added at the very, very tail end of installing the offense. That's not anything that has been really, you can kind of blame Jaylen Warren for this. As soon as he said anything about Justin Fields possibly returning kicks, which I do think I
don't think that's happening.
No, but I think that got the wheels turning for a lot of people and being like, well, maybe okay, well, even if he doesn't return kicks, maybe he can be Slash 2.0. Maybe he can be, what Cordell Stewart was to the Steelers in 1995 whenever they made their run to the Super Bowl. What he did as a rookie and sometimes line up and actually play quarterback and even ran the option, which you don't see at the NFL level, but also lined up outside as receiver, caught a big touchdown pass in the AFC Championship game that year. It's but I don't think that that's actually going to happen. And it's not anything that the Steelers have been practicing to this point. I didn't cover OTAs or minicamp, obviously, so I'm not going to pretend to be like, oh yeah, I was there. But I do know that that's just not something that they've done, and that's not surprising to me whatsoever because the goal during OTAs and minicamp is literally the offense is being installed and it's at its infancy stage at that point with the offense. Yeah, it's like they're laying the foundation for installing the offense. That is not when you start talking about special packages or doing anything. Like literally you're in the beginning stages of getting the language down, getting the cadences down, getting all of those little bit, and then not to mention you're still building the playbook. And then there's more to go through that in training camp. Russell Wilson and Justin Fields both have to learn how to play quarterback within that offense before you can start asking either one of them to be like, hey, do you mind being a receiver in this package? Or, hey, do you mind lining up, like as a pseudo tight end or in the backfield as a running back? I don't think anything. And to be completely honest, I'd be surprised if that actually ended up happening with Justin Fields. But even if it does happen, that has been very much overblown by the national media.
Yeah,
that could actually happen. And honestly, I don't want to see it happen because I think, to be completely honest, I do think that Justin Fields stands a very good chance of becoming a better quarterback. I don't know about like superstar level quarterback, but becoming a better quarterback under Arthur Smith. I think his offense, his system is very, very friendly to what Justin Fields does, to for his ability to throw out of play action, for his ability to throw the ball deep. He's got the arm talent and the arm strength, and the right, just a good throwing motion to make throws over the middle of the field. But how can Arthur Smith dial things up so that maybe the windows are a little, aren't quite as tight, where Justin feels like he has to force throws to the middle because the numbers over the middle have not been good for him. So Williams saying, you're telling their secrets. Like, I'm really not. I wasn't there. Like, I really was not there. Now, once I get to training camp, that's different. But even then, I'm not telling anything that nobody else is seeing because practices are open to the public. But it's just, I do think that it's a better quarterback room overall.
Oh, 100%. Yeah.
Not denying the fact that there are questions. And I think that, like, once you say something like, I think the quarterback room is better, you immediately get clap back and say, well, what about Mason Rudolph? Mason Rudolph I'm not saying anything about Mason, not saying anything about what Kenny could possibly do under a different coordinator or in a different offense. And it wouldn't surprise me if Kenny took a step while in Philly. Maybe he gets a chance to play a few games if Jalen Hurts gets injured and he looks like a different quarterback. It's very possible for that to happen. But I still think that this is a better room overall. And as we all know, quarterback is the most important position in the game.
Yeah. So. And when I was talking about, like, just the, how they might be able to use Fields, I guess I was hinting at, or not hinting, but speaking on the possibility of it, maybe the openness, opening the possibilities of getting a little more creative with two quarterbacks that have started at some point in the NFL that have been highly successful, or been successful, not highly successful. I think it opens doors. That's all. And I like the idea of it.
but listen, Justin Fields, man, like to your point, like, he's been very, very, the athleticism, the ability to run with the football.
Yeah.
He's got very good vision as a ball carrier. And some people just turn him into a running back. It's like, well, no, he doesn't have the size for running. You can't just turn somebody who's a good runner, occasionally as a quarterback into an actual running back. It's a completely different art. It's like a lot of people just thinking that Nick Herbig can switch from being an edge rusher to becoming an inside linebacker, like an off-ball linebacker. Like, it's a completely different position. It's just, it's not the same thing. Just because they have the skill set that could possibly fit that position doesn't mean that they can do it. Because there's a lot that has to go on up here in order to actually play that position well. And if you want any proof of that, Mark Robinson's a very good example of that. 7th round pick who played running back and is now playing linebacker, and he's still kind of learning the position, and it's been 2 years. So I think that I do think that it would be interesting that if the Steelers were to create some packages or something where even if Russell Wilson is healthy, they can get Justin Fields on the field so that he can do something to create something, because he is a dynamic player. He's too talented to just be holding a clipboard for 17 games.
Like you can't keep a Ferrari in the garage. You got to let it loose. And you can't just keep him on the sideline. You got to find some way to use him.
Yeah. I got it. You brought him up earlier in just a quick little sentence. You know, if you weren't listening carefully, you might have missed it, but you brought up Patrick Queen signing him. Yeah. I do think that is obviously, it was the splash signing in free agency, but I think sometimes we can kind of just, because of the quarterback situation, because of the constant fascination or expectation of the Steelers possibly trading for a receiver, that we just kind of keep forgetting just how good of a signing that is.
Yeah, I think it got overlooked for sure.
Yeah, at the time it wasn't. When it happened, it was like, whoa, okay, they just signed a top tier linebacker, and here, sometime tomorrow, that my linebacker preview, my positional preview series will be continuing with the linebacker position, and that's going to be a big part of it. And being like the year before, it was Cole Holcomb and Elandon Roberts, and some good signings, not anything bad. And Cole Holcomb was good before he got injured. And Quan Alexander was a great pickup before at the start of training camp. And then Landon Roberts, like, we know what he could do against the run. He's proven that as a veteran, but he was even better in pass coverage than I expected him to be. It was still a very good room. It just got completely decimated by injuries. Mm-hmm. So I think if they would have, had everybody healthy, even if they didn't bring Quan Alexander back, like even having Cole Holcomb and Landon Roberts, I think it's still a solid position. But signing Patrick Queen put it over the top, man. Like we're not even talking about Peyton Wilson being drafted in the 3rd round. Like, we're not even talking about that. I'm just talking about signing Patrick Queen. That is huge. It's not just taking away from the Ravens. He's a very, very legitimate linebacker in this league. And there are some that are concerned that, he's just benefiting from playing next to Roquan Smith. And I don't think that that's the case. I think he's very good on his own. I think he's going to prove that this year. And I think that can unlock so many things for the rest of the defense, talking about what you can do up front, what you can do on the back end, knowing that Joey Porter Jr. is out there, could lock down a receiver, that Minkah can be back in center field playing Minkah ball again. You can do so many things in the second level of that defense with Patrick Queen in there.
Yeah, and I mean, you kind of hit on it a little bit there, but Logan Wilson's probably one of Peyton Wilson, sorry, is probably the player I'm most excited to see this year.
Yeah.
Like, and kind of see how he grows and see what he does. Obviously, like, he had all the injuries in college and things like that. I'm excited to see what he brings to this defense.
But he was the best defensive player in the country in college last year. It's not like he's coming in with, he's a high talented guy, but it's a high risk because he's not. No, he was voted the number 1 linebacker and the number 1 defensive player in the country. Like, he won the awards for those things. He's accomplished at the college level. And the only concern really was about, he's missing an ACL. So, like, how is he going to hold up? Man, if the health concerns aren't concerns, Tito says it right here, man. He could be the steal of the draft, the entire draft. So, adding Patrick Queen, adding Peyton Wilson, it adds a lot of speed, athleticism to that room. They can do a number of different things. Shoot, man, they could even blitz from there. That's something the Steelers really haven't been able to do since the 08, like, in 2010 defenses, when they had like Lawrence Timmons and Larry Foote and James Ferrier. They really haven't been able to blitz from the, well, maybe Ryan Shazier too, but like, they really haven't had the ability to truly blitz from that second level on the inside in a long time. And adding Patrick Queen, who's a very good pass rusher in his own right, and adding Peyton Wilson to that too, man. Like, I think it's a huge addition there. And I think we're not doing ourselves good, many favors by saying the stuff, because
that's how I feel.
No one, saying I'm ridiculously hyped for Peyton Wilson. If this dude ends up becoming some sort of bust, people are gonna be like, what were you guys talking about? Like, it's just like trying to not build up the hype too much, because I think, even for all these reasons of optimism, I do think that, we can talk about, first off, there are still some holes on this roster, I do think. And Randy brings this up here. Deontay Johnson may have been a huge loss. We hope receivers on our roster will be able to step up. Deontay Johnson is a big loss. They don't, for anybody who is not a Deontay guy, and there's plenty of people who watch this show who are not, and that's fine, but they don't have anybody else in that room right now who can do what Deontay does. Nobody. And that's a big time loss when you consider somebody who can line up on the opposite side of George Pickens on the outside and say, okay, we're set. We got one guy who's just a freak who can do pretty much anything he wants if he continues to get better. And then we have another guy who's better at almost any other receiver than, gaining that separation and getting open. And, that's a huge loss. And then somebody brought it up as well. Let me try to find it here. Chris B71 here says, I'm honestly more concerned with defensive line depth. And there are questions there. There are questions on that inside with Cam Hayward, with Larry Ogunjobi, Keanu Benton. There's a lot of reason to be excited about him, but it's still not guaranteed. He's still got to go out there and earn it. and then the depth behind him, so to kind of veer from the optimism, what's your biggest concern right now with this roster?
I think it's we were kind of hitting on it right there. I think it's the wide receiving room. When it's just George Pickens, the guys, got to prove themselves. They got to, we've talked about it a couple different times of, obviously there's still the Ayuk trade possibly out there going to get another wide receiver. For me, I think that's it. You can only do so much with one wide receiver. Obviously I think they're going to have a great running game, and I think Russ and Fields are going to pan out, but I think you need to give them targets. So I think that's the biggest concern for me right now.
Yeah, I would probably lean receiver for me as well, just because we actually saw like a 4-game sample of what this offense looks like. Now, granted, Matt Canada's offense, granted, Kenny Pickett at quarterback, but still, we saw how defenses treated this offense whenever Deontay Johnson wasn't there, and that it's just I've used one clip, one snapshot of an all-22 film. Now, to me, it just encapsulates everything. It wasn't the only play that had happened, but there was one play against the Raiders last year where the Raiders were in cover 1. And for anybody who doesn't understand coverages, cover 1 means there's one guy back covering the entire field on the deep end, on the deep third. And there's one guy who's responsible. And so typically what he'll do if with certain receivers is he'll kind of shade that way, or maybe if they've got 2 good receivers, he won't really shade one way or the other. He'll just kind of he'll have to read what the formation is, what the tendencies are, and then make his shading that way. There was one where the Raiders were in cover 1 and they had a dude pressed up on George Pickens, and that safety was shaded so far over where he might as well have just been right over the top. And there were 4 eligibles on the opposite side of the formation. 4. It was the Steelers were in a 4-by-1, and they had the press corner up in George Pickens' grill and the safety shaded over the top of them, leaving 4 eligibles to a corner that was like off the ball a bit, like 8 to 10 yards off the ball, and then any linebackers that would have been responsible for those other eligibles. Everybody else was in man coverage, one-on-one. They're like, we're not worried about those guys. Are you kidding? Like that, you can't, like you put, for example, if they do trade for Brandon Ayuk, teams aren't doing that. You cannot do that.
No,
you can't. Even if Deontay Johnson's over there, you can't do that.
Yeah.
Because then you've got literally cover 1, and if both of those guys are running a go, one of those guys is going to be open. One of those guys is going to be, like, I won't say open, but he's going to have one-on-one coverage. It's going to be, okay, it's a 50-50 ball at that point. And so, it's a completely different situation when you don't have that other guy on the opposite side of the formation. It's impossible to replace.
Yeah, you need another option. It's simply as simple as that. And no one that they had last year kind of scared opposing defenses, which that's why it resulted in that. And so and that's why I think it ranks up so high for me, is because when you just have one guy who can kind of stretch the field and everything like that, and you don't really have any other options, it kind of is what it is at that point.
I don't think it necessarily has to be a Brandon Ayuk type where you're paying somebody $30 million a year, but if you can get, not that I think it's going to happen. I don't think Denver's going to trade him, but like a Cortland Sutton type, it doesn't have to be a guy who's going to get a huge, gigantic contract. But if it's a guy who's, probably fits the mold of being a legitimate number 2 on almost any roster, that works too. Because then, if then George is still your number 1 guy, you kind of expect him to be your number 1 guy. But if he were to ever go down with an injury, it's not like, okay, well, now Cortland Sutton's our 1. Okay, we could have a better 1, but it's a lot better than Van Jefferson.
Yeah.
Or Calvin Austin III. Like, because that to me is the biggest, because as long as George Pickens is on the field, you can worry. You can't, okay, well, at least we have Pat Freiermuth, and Arthur Smith loves to use tight ends. So that's good. And then there's Roman Wilson, who we don't want to forget about, but he's typically more of a slot guy. That's what he played more in Michigan. So you would expect that he plays more out of the slot. not as much on the outside. So you can't just automatically assume, oh yeah, let's just throw him outside and see what he does. Like, you can't really do that. But if George Pickens goes down, who's the guy to step up? Who's the number one?
Exactly. There's no one. I don't think there's no one right now.
Yeah. This is a misconception about Deontay. Cecil says Deontay had butterfingers far too often. Man, when a guy gets 1 million targets, he's going to drop. It's going to look like he drops more passes. His catch rate is not anything that's like completely alarming. Could he have been better? Like, should he have dropped less passes? Of course. Like, there were still some painful drops in there, but that was not something that you'd take that right now over what the Steelers have right now.
Yeah.
Like, Deontay's not a perfect receiver. He's got his flaws. I'm not denying that whatsoever. But when you look at, if the Steelers go into the season with this group, there's a lot of reason to be hesitant on what this offense really can do. In terms of, like, right now, I think it could be a solid offense. I wouldn't quite put it in the category of being like, this is a really good offense. I think they can throw the ball. Or, I'm sorry, I think they can run the ball. But if they trade for Ayuk or Deebo Samuel or DK Metcalf or any of these guys, that gives them the ability to. You're talking about possibly dangerous offense. That's about as good as it gets without having like a legitimate, undoubted franchise quarterback.
No, I agree. I think they're one move away from being a very dangerous offense. And to be honest, I mean, depending on how it all shakes out with the quarterback and, if the offense works and everything like that. But, if you have a solid number one and a solid number two and a great running game, that sets you up to do some damage.
Yeah. A friend of the show who was on last week, Matt Williamson, debunked that Deontay drops too many myth on his show this morning. So I haven't listened to his Scott's Eye yet today, but I would then urge you to go listen to it because Matt knows his stuff. Either way, regardless, we've had the Deontay debate on this show plenty of times. And Cody kind of here says it, elite quarterback play from a top 10 offense. And that, I mean, we're like, I would agree with that, because I think if you were to magically put Josh Allen on this offense, not changing anything else that the Steelers have right now, then yeah, it's a top 10 offense. Quarterback changes everything. Like, it changes everything.
Yeah.
You can get away with not having such a Kansas City last year. Their receiver room was a mess. How many games did they lose because their receivers couldn't catch passes, or because they were lined up offside?
You said it, not me.
I'm just saying, like their receiver room was a mess.
No, it was. And I mean, especially early on.
Yes.
But when you have a guy like Patrick Mahomes, and then you also have like a number one target like Travis Kelce, it alleviates a lot of pressure off of the receiving core, and allows them to just kind of get open. And if Freiermuth shows up this year and they can like be a top 2 target for this offense, they could be solid. Like they could be fine as they are. I just think they're like a middle of the pack, like number 2 wide receiver away, like someone that can just draw some coverage away from the other side of the field.
Yeah. Lifted Ones says no Josh Allen praise. They were bailed out last season. I'm not trying to get into what the Bills did. I'm just saying that if you magically put an elite quarterback, and I don't think that I'm going out on a limb and saying Josh Allen is an elite quarterback. There's only a handful in the league. I'll even say Joe Burrow. If you can magically put Joe Burrow on the Steelers right now, and he's your number 1 quarterback, this roster it's a top 10 offense. You have a legitimate franchise quarterback it's a game changer. If you were to magically go back in time and get Ben Roethlisberger from 2014 and put him on this team right now, like throw him in the DeLorean, bring him 10 years into the future, it's a top 10 offense. Like, you have that type of quarterback, it changes everything. And so that's why, like, yes, as of right now, with the questions that there are at quarterback, you would feel a lot better about the roster if that receiver position was a little more shored up. That's what I would say. Lifted One says, I bet you would say Blake Bortles too. No, I would not. I would not say Blake Bortles. Blake Bortles has never been considered an elite quarterback, ever. And B-Phil says Russell Wilson used to be viewed as that. He did. Russell Wilson is on trajectory to at least being, at the very minimum, at least in the discussion for the Hall of Fame. I don't know if he actually gets in, but in the discussion, he'll get votes. He'll be listed as a semifinalist one day and maybe even listed as a finalist. I don't know if he'll ever gets in, but he'll be in the conversation. But he's also 35. He's not the guy that he was whenever he was in his heyday in Seattle. It just, could he be like good enough? Could he be, if he puts up the same numbers he put up in Denver last year, the quarterback play is better, but it's also not elite. It's not at that top tier. That's what I would say. All right. Hold on. Rick asked a funny question. Can you say that Burrows makes Pickens Jamar Chase right out of the gate? Man, I think any elite quarterback could make George Pickens one of the best receivers in the league. Honestly, George Pickens has that ability. No, he has the ability. He has the tools. He has the ability to do whatever he wants if he's got even good quarterback play. That's what I'm saying. Like if Fields or Wilson like are above average this year, or even just good, not great, not elite, but just good, George Pickens could be an all-pro this year. I don't feel like that's a stretch.
Yeah, he's so athletic, and he has such a large catch radius that he's one of those guys where you just kind of have to give him an opportunity. Like throw him up a 50-50 ball and just kind of let him go, which is why I think Russ is such a great quarterback for him, because he can hit those deep balls. And
Russ has always been good at that.
Yeah, and I think it's a good fit, and I think he's on the verge of becoming one of the great wide receivers in the league. Like he has all of the tools to do it, and he's going to be in a somewhat of a perfect situation where he's going to be the go-to guy on the offense.
Rick says interesting. I don't think he's proven that yet. I agree, he hasn't proven it. I'm just saying he's had shoddy quarterback play for 2 seasons. And the moment that he got a guy who came in and was competent in the pocket, not amazing, didn't do anything extraordinary, but did all of the ordinary stuff at an efficient level, competent play. Look at the numbers that he put up. Just look at the numbers that he put up against Cincinnati and Seattle. He does that or anything even close to that for 13 of 17 games or 12 of 17 games, you're talking about an all-pro, legitimately.
Yeah.
That's why I'm saying if he has even somebody who is a good quarterback, he could put up good, big enough numbers where he could be in that all-pro discussion. So that's why I say because shoot, man, last year, 63 catches, I think, but for 1,140 yards. Averaged 18.1 yards per carry. He can catch the deep ball. We know that. And he just happens to have 2 guys, whether it's Wilson or Fields, who throw a really good deep ball. Yeah. Lifted Ones brings up a good little, if we could do this, GP with Big Ben would be crazy. I agree.
Yeah. I can agree with that too.
I think even Ben has thought at times man, I wish I could throw at a guy like George Pickens. Give me one more year. Give me one more crack at it. All right, I think we're gonna go ahead and wrap it up. Well, Cecil asked a good question. Do you guys think that the Chiefs three-peat? What do you think?
I think it's just so it's so hard to do. So I mean, like he said, I would take the field, to be honest. If I was a betting man, I'd take the field. But right. It's something that's so hard to do, but if someone's going to do it, it's going to be them, obviously. I mean, with what they've done the past couple of years.
Yeah, I'm starting to get more and more of the mentality where even in a year And I had Patrick Mahomes on my fantasy team last year, on one of my fantasy teams last year, and did not like it at all. Like it was, I regretted that. It did not work out for me. But I'm just at a point now where I will not bet against Patrick Mahomes.
No.
There's nothing that could happen. I'm talking. I can't imagine the receiver room getting any worse for him. Yeah, I guess he still had Travis Kelce, but I really don't care. The receiver room was terrible. I can't imagine him having a worse cast around him, and he still ended up winning the Super Bowl.
Yeah, and I mean, it was a down year for Kelce too. Like I don't think he had over 1,000 yards last year, right?
I have to look. Let me see. I'll pull that up real quick. Maybe we'll see. My freaking slow computer. Travis Kelce in 2023. Come on, let's go. Jeez. No, he did not. 93 catches for 984 yards and 5 touchdowns.
Yeah. And I mean, that's
coming after 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 straight seasons of at least 1,000 yards. Yeah. Dude was a freak. Still kind of is. But
yeah.
William says it was Taylor.
I was laughing at
that. If anything, I probably think that the romance with Taylor Swift like kind of gave him that motivation because he had another gear in the playoffs. Like he looked more like the Travis Kelce that we're used to seeing once they got into the playoffs. I'm still waiting for the Sierra Taylor Swift Bowl on Christmas Day. Like so many people are going to be interesting. Yeah, so many people are like, oh my God, it's going to be Steelers Chiefs. I'm like, no, man, this is going to be Sierra versus Taylor Swift. All right. Well, I'm going to go and wrap it up today. Tomorrow we'll be back. We'll make it a Football Friday again, make it a Q&A session again. It'll be the last show before the week of training camp because remember, no shows next week. So it'll be the last show. So prepare your questions, bring them. We'll answer as many as we possibly can. And then a week off from here. And then when we come back, training camp will be getting underway very, very shortly. I'm excited about it. I know Greg's excited about it. We're all excited about it. I know you guys are excited about it. So thank you guys so much. Appreciate it. Catch you guys on the flippity flip. See you later.
See you guys.